Which came first, Archon or Slime? It is the same age-old debate of which came first, chicken or egg. There are a bunch of theories, but the more you think about it, the more it becomes wonkier. The writers of Genshin's story like to leave clues here and there for us to pick up and piece the world together to create an image of what they are planning. So I will use these clues dating back to the Genshin manga to explain the fates of all the Archons and question their existence, and help you figure out an answer for the Archon Slime question I raised earlier. In Genshin World, there are two events people either fear or talk about in high regard. Although the severity of this event has faded from people's memories due to time, out of these two events, the Archon War was the most brutal. Hundreds of gods who were once peacefully roaming the continent of Teyvat were put into a Hunger Games-like war that lasted almost a millennia, in which one victor from each region was given the title of Archon and a device called a Gnosis. Strange detail here is why the old gods agree to kill each other for this title. The existing Archon of Liyue, Morax, or Zhangli as you probably know, had to kill his partner from that era to win the war. In Inazuma, for the previous Archon, Makoto, to win the war, the existing Archon, Ei, had to die. According to the book Treasured Tales of the Chokuen Shinkageuchi, Makoto eventually recreated Ei's body and brought her back to life. Why were these winners forced to kill their own loved ones? One theory is that it allowed the Archons to rule without hindrance after being appointed. That is politically correct and all for the reason. But what was Celestia's reasoning for hosting this war? If we go back in time, according to the tablet found in Enconomia before Sun and Moon, a being called France, or as people call it, the primordial one, came down to this world from a different world. Before this being came, the world was unified and 7 dragon sovereigns ruled the world. They absorbed the primordial energy of the world to manipulate 7 elements. But when the primordial one came, he defeated all the 7 dragon lords and banished the survivors underground, which are now named bishops and inhabit the bishop realm, previously known as light realm. Then he split the world to create heaven and earth. Later, the heavens, or now as we call Celestia, opened up 7 seats for 7 gods to ascend. Here's where my theory comes into play. What if the Archon War was not just there to appoint 7 Archons to rule the 7 nations, but was appointed to change the fundamental nature of the elements? Previously, the elements were harnessed from the primordial energy of the world by the dragons, but now the elements are powered by the ley line energy. Then you may raise the question, could this primordial energy be the ley line energy we know today? The thing is, it's a real possibility, but as things are now, there are 2 energy sources. The elemental attacks of the primordial baptismal bishops drain our elemental energy, and if it drops to 0, they drain our life force, which is connected to the ley lines. So it's like when in contact, the power they use neutralize our energy. Some electro enemies also drain our energy, but they do not drain our HP if we don't have elemental energy. The bishops were the slimes of that era. They are based on the dragon lords who control the 7 primordial elements, which makes the slimes based on the nature of the element in this era after the change had happened. As the theory goes, slimes are based on the 7 Archons, but recently people have started to doubt this theory. That's totally fine. They are called theories for a reason. The slimes do not represent the Archons. Instead, they represent the changed form of that element. So again, why were the Archons forced to kill each other? The Gnosis essentially changed the nature of the element according to the original Archon's ambitions. As Venti said, a Gnosis is like an external organ in their body. It becomes a part of that original 7 that can be passed down to the next generation. But similar to a real organ, the Gnosis can only be transplanted into a person compatible with it. Hence why visions are given to people with similar ambitions to the original Archons. So in the future, when they receive a Gnosis, they won't reject it as Ei did. Ei and Makoto were 2 sides of the same coin, or plus and minus of a charge. So inherently, they are different in nature, and Ei had no use for something that plays backwards in her favor, transience versus eternity. If you capture an enemy region, the first thing to change is the laws and how people think. The primordial one gave people treasures, food, and land. Food, the way to win people's trust. Before the Archon War, all the gods used elemental powers without using an elemental foci. Examples are the existing Archons who survived the Archon War and gave up on their gnosis. But after the war, except a few individuals, only the vision bearers would use elemental powers. Even the current era gods, the ascended Allergenes, are previous vision bearers. Considering this situation, Celestia must have wanted to remove the people who knew how to use elements naturally and implement a new system. A system they can monitor. Basically, this whole game is a metaphor for the illusion of choice. Since the previous era used the primordial elements, the gods of the pre-Archon War era also harnessed that power to manipulate elements. So removing the mass who knew how to use the primordial elements and bribed the few who survived gave Celestia respect brought up by the ignorance. By bribing, I mean giving them the power to reach their ambition and knowledge of something greater. But that's too deep, I don't even have any clues about that. But since Zhongli refuses to speak about these matters, these truths become even more curious. The Archons have a peculiar pattern if you look at them closely. They are, in a sense, predictable. The original Archons were masters of one element. Unlike some other gods who fought for the Gnosis, Machosius was Geo and Pyro, and Andreas was Anemo and Cryo. From the beginning, they had no shot in winning the war. Genshin talks a lot about destiny. When it comes to Morax, he is the lord of Geo and nothing else. But other gods like Guizhang and Havria are gods who cultivated derivatives of Geo like dust and salt. And Raiden twins were a perfect match for the plus-minus duo. It's like the original seven who cultivated the purest form of the seven elements were destined to win the war and take the positions as Archons. Venti was a shred of wind, given life and grew into a pixie-like creature. He was made of Anemo and passively knew how to use Anemo. But what is more interesting is the things we cannot see. The rest of the 7 Archons in 5 regions we yet to have stepped into. Tsaritsa is the Archon of Nesnaya and the god of Cryo. Some tropes and systems in the Chinese martial arts genre are borrowed by Genshin for the upgrade system. In the Treble trailer, Dainsleif introduced the Tsaritsa as someone who no longer loves anyone. In said martial arts stories, most women who cultivate ice element have to suppress their emotions to attain more power and more control, which most cryo characters show signs of. Shenhe, Changyun, Rosaria, Chi-Chi and Ganyu have their emotions dulled to some extent, and Kaya, Ayaka, Eula and Diona suppress their true intentions and emotions due to their position in life. People believe it's a more conflicted nature of their ambitions. It is true to some extent, but the ice-cold personality is something more fitting of them. Someone like Kaya or Diona might put a face on the surface, but they have suppressed their true emotions to live with that conflicted reality. Tsaritsa might be the god of love, but the power of Cryo lies in suppressing that emotion to understand the true nature of the human heart. I know it's hard to take in, but that is the most popular fate of ice-related cultivators. After what happened in the Cataclysm 500 years ago, Tsaritsa became cold, but the visions are given out according to the nature of the element, the ambition of the original Archon. So the previous Archon was also an ice queen like Tsaritsa now. They both had a change of heart due to some realization. Maybe it was the brutality of the Archon War. Like Tsaritsa, Original also suppressed their emotion after seeing the true nature of the human heart and accepted reality to exist in it. And that is what got implemented as the nature of the cryo element. A brittle heart mended together by ice. A recurring theme with the Archons is that they are doppelgangers of Hershers in Honkai Impact. But there's a twist. Archons are the mirror image of some Hershers. They look alike, but their position in the story and values are flipped. Venti is the mirror image of Vendi. Venti plays a major role in the whole story of Genshin as one of the only survivors remaining from the pre-Archon War era, and as the god representing heaven in Heaven and Earth pair, he is one of the most valuable characters. But Vendi died off screen without even having enough screen time. On the other hand, A is the mirror image of Mei. Aside from Mei being good at cooking and A being the worst possible, their positioning in the story is much apart. Mei is one of the main cast and a recurring character in the Honkai storyline alongside Kiana. But once we leave Inazuma, Ei's relevance to the story would fade bit by bit. She will be a relevant character since she is one of the Archons who lived before the Archon War, but not to the extent a main character would have. Like those two, Murata is a character compared with Murata Himeko from Honkai Impact. In the story of Honkai, Himeko eventually died and was a motivative reminder to the main cast. But Genshin cannot do that. Traveler barely stays in one region and are not invested in the Archon to the extent Himeko was to the main cast of Honkai. But would the Archon Murata die like Himeko? Probably will, but for a different purpose. We have yet to see a Archon being replaced by an Allergen with our own eyes. So there is a possibility she would die for Vanessa to take her place as the new Archon. There are two possibilities who the current Murata might be. She will be Himeko's counterpart nonetheless. But what is her origin in Genshin? According to Genshin manga, Venti called Vanessa and other red-haired people like her Murata's children. Venti knew the original Murata, who lived 1000 years ago relative to Vanessa's time, according to what she said. But as we know, current Pyro Archon is not the original. So, there is a possibility that the original Murata blessed a clan with red hair, like how Morax illuminated his subordinate Adaptai, and they inherited that blessing through generations. Or, they are the original Archon Murata's biological descendants. This possibility is very human, so I would stick to it. Until Vanessa's generation from the tail end of the Archon War, there were about 1000 years. Within 1000 years, her bloodline would have passed down to at least 40 generations. So Vanessa's clan separating from the original branch of the family is quite possible. Even Diluc being a descendant of Murata is a possibility. Like Vanessa's clan drifted from Natlan all the way in the west to Mondstadt in the north, one of Murata's original children might have run off and used his father's name Raganmender. If they are descendants of Murata, they essentially become descendants of a god. Naturally, they would inherit strength beyond a regular human. During the Mondstadt aristocracy era, Vanessa chased away a drake with the help of Venti. And 1000 years later, the same drake was killed by Diluc's father Crepus Raganmender with the help of his delusion. It couldn't be a coincidence when the same dragon was beaten by two people with the same hair. And when Vanessa ascended to Celestia, she became an eagle and came down to monitor Teyvat. Coincidentally, according to Diluc's name card, Crepus used to paint a load of eagles, and Diluc himself holds an eagle in his idle animation and releases a phoenix as his burst. Phoenix is essentially an eagle on fire. So the current Archon is a descendant of the original Archon Murata, who inherited the original's will. Even though Snezhnaya and Natlan are after Fontaine, we have the least amount of information about the Hydro Archon from Fontaine. According to few clues, the Hydro Archon is the god of justice, and from what Dainsleif said in the Travel trailer, she is the god who controls the strings in the court of gods in Teyvat. But she too is afraid of the divine from Celestia. Because of the engineers like Xavier and Bertrand, we know that Fontaine pushes towards new technology. But unlike Sumeru, where research is funded by the government, Fontaine researchers need to find a sponsor to their research. According to what Patrice from Vibro Crystal Events said, if these researchers can't give results, they will be punished by the court system in Fontaine. From the clues currently available, the current Hydro Archon is a rigid person, unlike the original. Endora from the Visual Drops event explained that these oceanid-like creatures are called Lodgefolk and originated from Fontaine. Further, after the original Archon was replaced, most Lodgefolk left Fontaine and spread throughout Teyvat's clean water bodies. And when they left, they carried a part of the original Archon with them. But for some reason, Rodea, the oceanid of Qingze, is afraid that the Hydro Archon has sent assassins to kill her. So either the current Hydro Archon is working for Celestia and wants to destroy any remains of the last Hydro Archon, or the Lodgefolk who left Fontaine are hiding something and are living with anxiety. Most Hydro characters have the personality of someone who doesn't let anyone else get hurt in their presence. they will enact justice for anything. Shinshu always talks about justice and chivalry. Child wouldn't even let his family feel hurt because of his actions in the Fatui. Yelan hates even the thought of self-sacrifice, and Ayato will do anything for Kamisato clan and the Yashiro Commission's safety. So the current Hydro Archon cannot be as bad as the Lock folks say. Her actions might be dictated by the act of justice for someone's sake. Maybe due to a misunderstanding, she blames the Lock folk and other people for the death of the original Archon. So she enacts justice without being humane. Most people think the ambitions of the Vision Bearers and Archons are shallow as what they are told. But once you look at things from their perspective, the simplest ambitions are taken one step further. So I ask you this question again. Who came first? Archon or Slime? And this is a piece of my madness. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. While researching for this video, I watched the Travel trailer more than 10 times. And more I immerse myself in it, the more I get impatient to see these new regions. Sumeru feels old news now. I want to see Fontaine and its technology. But anyway, if you enjoyed the video, smash that like button. Join the madness by hitting that subscribe button. And if you like my stuff, check out these cool videos. But remember, this is just a theory in a random dude's head on the internet. As always, thanks for watching, and until next time, let your imaginations run wild.